Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unravel the mysteries lurking in the shadows and explore the stories that send shivers down your spine. From unsolved crimes to paranormal encounters, from eerie legends to the unknown, we're here to take you on a journey into the unexplained. Every story has layers, and every layer brings us closer to the truth, or deeper into the mystery. So grab a seat, turn down the lights, and get ready to dive into the unknown. This is the Deep Dive.
Ever notice how sometimes your money just doesn't seem to stretch as far as it used to? Like, you're playing a game, but the rules keep changing on you. Well, today we're going on a deep dive into the fascinating and sometimes frustrating world of money.
Yeah, the world of money, currency, how it all really works.
It's like going behind the scenes of a magic show almost.
It's amazing how often the average person shies away from financial systems.
Right.
But that's the thing about magic. It's only impressive when you don't see the mechanics behind it.
And we've got a stack of research here from financial experts, historical analyses, the works, suggesting those mechanics might be a little more questionable than we think.
As we dig into this, you'll start to see how historical cycles repeat, particularly when empires rise and fall, and their currencies. They play a starring role in that whole drama.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to connect the dots between all these different sources and try to help you understand how this really complex system impacts, your life, your listeners' lives.
Yeah, because let's face it, when it comes to money, we all want to be in on the secrets, right?
Right.
And one of the biggest secrets is the difference between money and currency. They sound like the same thing, but they're not, are they?
They're not. That's such an important point. And I always say, think of it this way. Money is like a valuable item you own, like a gold coin. It has intrinsic value because it's durable, it's rare, people have always wanted it, right? You could bury that gold coin in your backyard, dig up 1,000 years from now, and it would still have value. That's what makes it a store of value.
Okay, so gold, valuable, lasts forever.
Currency, on the other hand, is like a claim check for that gold coin.
Yeah.
It's a medium of exchange. It's something that makes buying and selling easier, right?
Okay.
But it's only valuable because we all agree that it is, right?
It's like those claim checks at the dry cleaners. They're not the clothes themselves. They're just a way to get your clothes back.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting and a little unnerving. Mm-hmm. Governments can create more currency whenever they want.
Really?
Just like printing more claim checks, even if there's no more gold to back them up.
Hold on a minute. So you're saying they can just print more money whenever they feel like it? What does that do to the value of the money I have in my pocket?
That's where we get into inflation, right? When more currency is created, but the amount of goods and services stays the same, each unit of currency becomes worth less, right? Prices go up, your purchasing power erodes.
That explains why my grocery bills keep getting higher.
Yeah.
But I thought inflation was just like a fact of life. Like death and taxes, it happens, right?
Yeah, it's certainly presented that way sometimes, but the reality is that the way our current monetary system is set up almost guarantees inflation.
Hmm.
So let's unpack how this currency creation actually happens.
Okay, because I think a lot of people, myself included, have this vague notion that the government just prints more money when it needs it, right? Like they just crank up the printing presses and boom, more money.
Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. But the government does play a key role. So it starts with the government needing to spend money, often more than it takes in through taxes, right? To bridge that gap, they issue bonds.
Okay.
And these bonds are essentially IOUs to investors. They're saying, give us money now, we promise to pay you back later with interest.
Give us money now, we promise to pay you back later. That sounds a little risky.
Well, that's one way to put it. Now, these bonds, they get bought and sold on financial markets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And banks are often the biggest buyers.
Okay.
And this is where the Federal Reserve, the Fed, comes in.
Uh-huh.
The Fed, through something called open market operations, buys these bonds from banks.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing so, injects new money into the system.
Wait, so the Fed just creates this money to buy these bonds out of thin air?
Yes. And to be clear, it's not like physical printing presses churning out dollar bills. That's all done electronically these days.
Oh.
But yeah, essentially they're creating new money.
Mind-blowing. So the government gets its money, the banks make money, and the Fed creates money out of nothing. Okay, so remind me, the Federal Reserve, or the Fed, isn't a government agency, right?
Right.
It's more like a private company
Right.
with shareholders, right?
That's right. And those shareholders receive a 6% dividend paid out from the profits the Fed makes. And where do those profits come from, you ask?
Yeah, where did those profits come from?
Well, in part, from those treasury bonds we were just discussing.
Hold on. Let me get this straight. The government borrows money by issuing bonds. The Fed buys them,
Right.
essentially creating money from thin air,
Essentially, yeah.
and then gets paid interest on that money. And we're the ones footing the bill for all of this through taxes.
You got it. It's a system that's been very, shall we say, advantageous for its architects. But whether it's sustainable long-term is a whole other conversation. This source claims that a whopping 92 to 96% of all existing currency is created this way.
Wow.
Through fractional reserve lending.
Okay, you're going to have to back up and explain that one. Fractional reserve lending?
Sure.
It sounds a little intense.
It's simpler than it sounds. Imagine you deposit $100 in your bank.
Okay.
They aren't required to keep all of it on hand. Let's say they only hold 10%.
Right, just enough in case I need to grab coffee and a croissant tomorrow.
Exactly. They lend out the other $90. That $90 gets deposited elsewhere, and they lend out 90% of that, and so on. Your initial $100 just multiplied into a much larger sum sloshing around.
So my latte money is suddenly propping up a mini economy. But what happens if everyone wants their money back at the same time? It's not like the banks have enough for everyone tucked away in a vault, right?
Yeah, that's the billion or trillion-dollar question, and a major concern these sources raise.
Wow, so from a single deposit, the money supply can, expand exponentially. No wonder a dollar today doesn't buy what it used to.
Right.
It's like a magic trick where they just keep pulling more rabbits out of a hat.
That's a great analogy. And here's the real kicker. A lot of the money that we pay in taxes, it ends up going right back into servicing this ever-growing debt.
Oh, wow.
Right. So we're essentially on this treadmill where we're constantly needing to create more money to pay off the interest on the money that we already borrowed.
So this $1 trillion interest payment that we talked about earlier, that's not just a big number.
Right.
That's a symptom of a system that seems, I don't know, inherently unsustainable. It's like trying to outrun your own shadow. You can't win.
That's a powerful way to put it. And this brings us to another crucial point. This isn't just a U.S. problem. It's happening globally, with almost every country engaging in this same cycle of debt and currency creation.
So it's like a global game of musical chairs. And when the music stops.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Well, that's where things could get really interesting. But before we delve into the potential consequences of all of this, let's take a step back and look at some historical parallels. Because if there's one thing scarier than the national debt, it's history. Am I right?
Right.
But seriously, what can we learn from the past that might shed some light on where we're headed?
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about scary history lessons, we could look back to the Roman Empire, and they had a debt crisis too. And it's where the historical parallels in these sources get really interesting, especially when it comes to the Roman Empire.
Right, because comparing our economy to ancient Rome is totally comforting. But before we go full gladiator on this, what's the point they're trying to make?
It's not about saying we're all about to don togas and build a Colosseum in Central Park, but history shows that empires, even mighty ones like Rome, often crumble under the weight of their own financial instability.
And they're saying we're heading down a similar path.
Let's just say there are some eerie parallels, particularly when you look at how the Roman Empire handled its currency, the denarius.
Okay, hit me with a Roman history lesson. What can a denarius tell us about our paychecks today?
Imagine you're an emperor, low on funds, but big on military campaigns and extravagant bathhouses. Raising taxes is unpopular, so what do? You get creative.
I'm sensing this doesn't involve sound economic policy.
Not quite. They resorted to coin clipping, literally shaving off the edges of silver coins. They'd melt those shavings down, mint more coins, and boom, instant cash injection. Later on, they resorted to revaluation, essentially stamping a higher value on existing coins, even though those coins contained less precious metal.
So it's kind of like printing more money, but trying to, pretend they didn't?
Exactly. And it had the same effect as printing more money does today, rampant inflation. Prices soared, people lost faith in the currency, and the economy, spiraled.
One source even compared it to shrinkflation, when your favorite bag of chips gets smaller, but the price stays the same.
Exactly. It's a sneaky form of inflation that erodes purchasing power over time. Whether it's ancient emperors clipping coins or modern companies shrinking products, the result is the same. you're getting less for your money.
So if coin clipping is the Roman version of, say, quantitative easing, what's their equivalent of price controls?
That would be Emperor Diocletian and his infamous Edict of Prices. Picture this. Runaway inflation, people struggling to afford basic necessities, so Diocletian decides to fix the problem with a sweeping decree.
He just set prices for everything.
Pretty much. From bread to beans, labor to luxury goods, he dictated the cost of everything and the penalty for disobeying: death.
Talk about a chilling price tag, but did it work?
About as well as you'd expect. Instead of curbing inflation, it created chaos. Shortages, black markets, economic distortions. It was a disaster. Turns out, you can't just force a complex system like an economy to bend to your will, even if you're an emperor.
But didn't Nixon try something similar in the 1970s with those wage and price freezes?
He did, which shows that even with centuries of historical evidence to the contrary, the temptation to control the economy through decrees is strong. And the outcome, predictably similar to Diocletian's: shortages, black markets, a whole lot of economic headaches.
It's like those fail videos where someone keeps trying the same trick expecting a different result. So what's the takeaway here? Besides the fact that economics apparently hasn't evolved much in 2,000 years.
I think the biggest takeaway is that these historical patterns highlight the potential consequences of manipulating currency and interfering with the natural ebb and flow of the market. Whether it's through coin clipping, price controls, or even modern monetary policies, the more we try to control these complex systems, the more unintended consequences seem to arise.
So if, manipulating prices isn't the answer and endlessly creating more currency just makes inflation worse, what is the solution? Are we, doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past?
There's always hope.
Okay.
But first, we need to, I think, fully grasp the scope of this challenge. Remember, this isn't just an American issue, it's a global one.
Right, you mentioned that earlier, but I still, I have trouble wrapping my head around that. What do you mean by global?
Think back to that chart that Maloney presented, showing the exponential increase in what's called base money. That's the currency created by central banks in countries all around the world since 2001. It's not just a trickle, it's a tsunami of new currency flooding the global economy.
So it's like every country is printing money like it's going out of style, and we're all kind of stuck dealing with the consequences.
And those consequences are already being felt. I mean, rising prices, that's the most obvious symptom, right? But it goes deeper than that. It's about the erosion of our savings. It's about the uncertainty it creates for the future. And frankly, it's about the potential for social unrest, right? When people feel like the system is rigged against them.
That's a pretty bleak picture. I mean, it's easy to feel powerless. There's nothing we can do as individuals.
Yeah, this is where understanding the system becomes so important. Knowledge is power, and it's the first step to making informed decisions.
So you're saying that even though it feels overwhelming, we're not entirely helpless?
Absolutely not. While we don't offer financial advice on this show, we can equip you with the knowledge to navigate these turbulent waters.
Okay, that's a relief. So where do we go from here? Is there a life raft somewhere in this sea of debt and currency creation?
But as we've kind of seen, just understanding the mechanics of the system is the first step to navigating it effectively. It's like learning the rules of a game almost, right?
Right, because if you don't know the rules, you're bound to lose, right?
Exactly.
So let's talk about how to win, or at least how to not get completely wiped out in this game. We touched on Ray Dalio's big cycle theory earlier, and it paints a rather sobering picture of, empires rising and falling based on certain patterns.
It does, yeah. But
Yeah.
but Dalio also emphasizes that, while recognizing those patterns is important, it doesn't mean we're powerless to change course.
That's good to hear. So what's the key? How do we avoid, becoming another cautionary tale in the history books?
Well, he uses this analogy of vital signs. Just like a doctor monitors, a patient's temperature, their blood pressure, and other indicators to kind of assess their overall health, we can look at, specific factors to kind of gauge the well-being of a nation's economy and even, its empire.
Okay, I like that analogy. So what are these vital signs for an economy? Give it to me straight, Doc.
Yeah.
How sick are we?
Well, some of the key indicators, they include education levels, innovation and technological advancement, competitiveness in global markets, the strength and stability of the political system, and yes, economic output, debt levels, and the value of the currency.
So it's not just about, how much money a country has, but it's also about its like overall health and well-being in these other areas.
Precisely. It's about sustainability, the ability to kind of maintain this healthy balance across these different vital signs.
So where does the U.S. currently stand in all of this? Are we like, are our vital signs strong? Are we showing signs of a healthy, thriving empire? Or are we looking a bit feverish? Maybe?
Well, according to Dalio's analysis, the U.S. is exhibiting, many of the symptoms of an empire in decline.
Oof, that's not what I wanted to hear, but I appreciate the honesty. What are some of those symptoms?
Well, I mean, we've already discussed, the massive debt levels, right? And that inherent instability of a system that's, based on constantly creating more currency. But there are other concerning signs as well, like, increasing internal conflict and political polarization. We see that a lot these days. Declining educational standards, growing competition from rising powers like China.
So we're not just like printing our way to problems. We're electing our way there. We're educating our way there. We're competing our way there. It's starting to feel a bit like that scene in the movie where they they're trying to patch up the spaceship while it's like falling apart all around them,
It's a colorful analogy, but I think it captures, that sense of urgency that a lot of economists and historians feel about the current situation.
Okay, so deep breaths, everyone. We've covered a lot of ground here, and I know it's easy to get caught up in all the the doom and gloom, right? But remember, understanding these historical patterns, recognizing these challenges we face, it's not about panicking. It's about empowering ourselves to make more informed decisions.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's shift gears a bit and talk about what we can do as individuals. What are some practical takeaways from all of this? I'm not talking about, building a bunker in my backyard and hoarding gold bars, am I?
Well, while some people might advocate for that approach, it's not necessarily the most practical or effective.
Okay.
Remember, knowledge is power.
Right, we've established that. But what do I do with that knowledge? How does understanding, currency creation and historical cycles, how does that help me, buy groceries and afford a house,
It's about making, informed decisions within the system that we have. One of the most important things you can do is educate yourself about personal finance.
So crack open a book instead of my wallet.
There you go.
I can get on board with that.
Yeah, learn about budgeting, saving, investing, diversifying your assets. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, especially if that basket is, woven from fiat currency.
That's good advice no matter what the economic climate's like.
Absolutely. And another key takeaway is to be mindful of debt. As interest rates rise, carrying large amounts of debt becomes increasingly burdensome. So, try to pay down, especially high interest debt, as quickly as possible.
So being smart with my money, investing wisely, and avoiding, unnecessary debt, that sounds like a recipe for financial health in any era, really.
Exactly. It's about taking control of your financial well-being, even in the midst of, uncertainty.
I like it. Knowledge is power, and proactive choices are key. Any final thoughts before we resurface from this deep dive?
Just this. History may rhyme, but it doesn't have to repeat itself. And by understanding these patterns of the past and really, demanding better from our leaders and from ourselves, we can strive to create a more stable and equitable financial future.
Now there's something to ponder. The road ahead might be bumpy, but hey, with a little awareness, with a little, thoughtful action, we can navigate the currents rather than being swept away by them. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking the big questions.
And that's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive. I hope you enjoyed today's exploration into today's mystery and that it gave you some valuable insights to think about. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our future deep dives. As always, thanks for diving deep with us today. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.